8.3. Oh, 8.3 is where you go to polar coordinates. Okay. This one, and actually, I might roll 8.4 in here because these took up a lot of pages. It's part of the reason I did them in two sections. Okay, polar coordinates are pretty much that same XY setup that you learned if you in school now. They do it almost in elementary school, but you do it in middle school, you do it in high school. You guys did it in algebra, you did it as part of the MTEs, that whole graphing setup. The X coordinate is the horizontal, the Y coordinate is the vertical. The only difference in polar is that your X coordinate is the real part of a number, and your Y coordinate is an imaginary part of the number. When I was in school, they were called imaginary numbers. Now it's kind of like Pluto. I don't know if they're imaginary or if they're real or whatever, but they're complex numbers, which means they have a real part and an imaginary part. If they're completely imaginary, that means the real number is 0. If they're completely real, which is all your regular numbers you're used to, then the imaginary part is 0. But this is just graphing where your x-axis is real, your y-axis is imaginary. It works the same way. You just stick that little eye on it. And we did complex numbers in the last semester. So I did go ahead and sketch out some graphs. I did a couple of these. I'm going to say this now. If we were in class, I would talk about how that absolute value formula is the Pythagorean theorem. All you're doing is taking the x leg and the y leg and figuring out the hypotenuse of a right triangle. If you printed these notes out or if you sketch these little graphs on a piece of paper, you'll realize that you can graph the complex number, then draw a straight line to the origin, and that's your hypotenuse of a right triangle. All that absolute value is that hypotenuse, which, if you remember, is the radius for what we've been doing in trig. And in 8.4, I'm going to do 8. Well, I'll talk about that. 8.4 is a similar thing. Alright, so I did go ahead and do all the work, all the little graphs. I did point out that you can simplify some of these radicals. If you had a calculator, you just give a decimal. I'm alright with any of those three things. Leave it the way it is. Change it to a decimal. Simplify it. Let's see. I did all these little bitty pieces to change to polar. I have eliminated a fair bit of explanation because at this point, I doubt you guys need this for anything. Mostly we just need to get through it. Get through it. Alright, so that was, I did all the way to 22. That's pretty amazing. Alright, there's 8.3. 8.3, there's the 25 section. I'm going to go ahead and do this video all at once. This is the flipping back and forth part. Going one way, going another way. Following the formulas. Some of these I converted to polar because it makes life easier. Some of these I didn't because it made life easier to leave it the way it was. I did the roots formulas. Those are long, they're a little tedious, they're kind of weird. But here's the issue. And this is also for 8.4, which I've not got loaded, but I'll do that today. The big kicker with math is that it's flexible. It is a way to take real life problems and put them on paper so that you're not destroying something just to figure it out. This change from regular XY coordinates to imaginary coordinates to polar coordinates, and then 8.4 is changing from trig and polar back and forth. It is all a matter of what is the easiest thing for me to work with. And that's part of the reason I did those last few roots or those multiplication ones. Sometimes what you have works fine. Sometimes what you have is near impossible to deal with. And math gives you a way to change the setup so that you can work with it and then go back to the complex part you had before. That is why math people are problem solvers. You don't graduate from math school. You don't graduate with a math major and say, I'm a math major, unless you're going to teach. If you're going to go out into the private sector, what you do is you tell people you're a problem solver. Because what you're good at is taking things apart, looking at it from a different perspective, realizing that you can fix this piece, and then put it back together and have the whole problem solved, even though the whole problem was hard to deal with. Changing formats, changing forms, changing languages, changing worlds from complex to real to The infinite series section is a little bit different too. All those things give you options. The 8.4 section, I'm just going to do it. It's going to have very little explanation. Most of the problems will just be done, so you have them, so you can get them on the test. But this is where I look like a real math nerd. That is the beauty of math. That is the reason it appeals to people who do puzzles. That's the reason I like it. It's the reason I'm good at it. Is because it gives you options. The problem is, at this point, you guys, A, don't like it that much, which is fine, and B, aren't good enough to make those decisions. It's kind of like teaching somebody to play football and the first day explaining to them why there are a certain number of laces and why you should hold it a certain way. That's not how you teach somebody to play a sport. You just put it in their hand and let them fling it for a while. Once they get used to flinging it, then you start to tweak what they're doing. However, we've screwed up education in some fashion because you aren't given a chance to play with it. I didn't give you formula and just let you fling it around. I've asked you immediately to decide, is this the best way? Is this the best way? Is this the best way? You don't have that kind of experience. You're not going to get that kind of experience. It takes years and years and years of work and practice to get the experience to make the decision that this is the best format, this is the best format, this is the best option. You're just not going to get it. Unless you wanted to get it, unless you wanted to do this, you wanted to learn it, you wanted to spend hours and hours doing problems and realizing the reason we changed here was because this made it easier. The reason we didn't change there is because it didn't really matter. That is experience. And what little bit of experience you were going to get in class is now even less because we're online and we all know this is sucky. So 8.4 I'll load in a little bit. I'm going to try to get 8.5 and 8.6 up, but I'm not going to promise. I don't want to put this in